Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Out Here. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can tell this is a real fire with real crackles, real sparks, and the waves in the background are actual waves lapping on the shore. If you are listening to this on audio format, you're going to have to take my word for it. But yeah, it's the real deal. I've been struggling with how to launch this podcast because I want it to be something really special. I want it to be genuine. I want it to be authentic. I don't want it to be 100% scripted or following some marketing plan. I just want this to be about real life out in the country on my own. My name is Tom. I am turning 52 later this year. I live on my own. I've been single most of my life, and I'm okay with that. And I hope you are too. I know there's a lot of pressure out there on men to settle down, get married, have a family, be a provider, and apparently it's in our DNA to provide. And I don't deny that in any shape or form. I certainly have felt the calling, and I've answered it in my own way, which I'll probably get to in a future podcast episode. But not all of us fit that mold. Not all of us found true love, or maybe we don't even know what it means. At least I've met women that I've liked, had strong feelings for. The situations never worked out, and I come to the point in my life where meaningless flings are not something I want to partake in anymore. If it's not real, I don't want it. And that's what I'm about, is I want life to be real. I want it to have meaning. I want it to be fulfilling. And it's not always easy to find that, especially when you're on your own. And in this podcast, as future episodes, we'll go into things about being alone versus loneliness, dealing with depression, blues, dealing with functions where it's you plus one are invited, for example, or the dreaded Valentine's Day. Yeah, so those are all things that we'll get to in future episodes, but tonight I'm feeling a little more philosophical about things, and I just want to talk about the miracle of life itself. Tonight, before having this fire, I fired up my lakeside sauna, which is over there, and I had a few rounds. I went into Lake Huron, which is what you can see over there. Sorry if you're on audio, but you have to take my word for it that it's over there. And 2 weeks ago, there was ice floating in that water. It is cold water, but I dove in, I swam a bit, and trust me when I tell you, it was very refreshing. Finlanders and Russians, I believe, have been doing this for a very long time. It's very healthy, and I've been doing it for years myself. It's just something that I do it's part of my weekend routine for healing and recharging. And I love it, and I feel like $1 million after. And of course, I follow up with a wet bladed shave and just feel absolutely amazing. A little dehydrated right now, and it's hard to hold the camera, the mic, and drink water at the same time, but I'll get to that eventually in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, it's just a miracle that this planet holds 8 billion human lives, apparently. Countless other forms of life that science has barely scratched the surface of. We have oceans covering 70+% of the planet's surface. We haven't explored. We know more about the moon and the nearby planets than we know about our own subaquatic life on this planet. Our planet has an iron core creating a magnetic field that prevents solar winds from frying us with radiation. That also gives us those magnificent northern lights from time to time. The miracle of life itself, like for you to exist, the scientists have done some calculations. And it's something like 1 in 400 trillion are the odds that you can be on this planet. As it is, you're unique. You're one of currently 8 billion. So just being here is a miracle. And it seems to me like we never spend enough time to appreciate that. Life is a miracle. You being here on this planet is a miracle. Me talking to you over the internet is a technical marvel and a miracle. You finding this podcast is a miracle. It is truly wonderful to be alive. I find it a miracle that with this little place we call Earth, that there's 8 billion of us, and I can sit here on the shore of Lake Huron, one of the 5 Great Lakes in North America, at my beautiful home. Beautiful home here, all by myself. There's no one here to bother me. There's no noise that I'm not creating myself or nature's creating for me. I feel truly blessed to have this spot out in the middle of nowhere. I have to come clean and tell you that among my ways of earning income to support my lifestyle out here is I am a holistic life coach. Now, I'm not making this podcast to specifically sell life coaching to anyone, but I do want you to know that if at any time you want to explore a more deeper, holistic, meaningful way of living your life, I do offer a free discovery call, and you can find out more about that in the show notes. But that's it for my plug on that. I am also a professional. I'm not going to say what I do because I want this to have nothing to do with my professional life. And if you do happen to know me and know what my professional life is, I would appreciate it if you keep it to yourself and not mention in the comments or in any way, shape, or form talk about what I do to earn money. Because the powers that be seem to think they can regulate everything and anything I say or do. And I'm exercising my right to free speech as a Canadian citizen. So yeah, I live in Canada. That in itself was another miracle. A miracle whose bright light I believe is dimming. That's something I might touch on in a future episode, but not 100% sure because I really don't want to bring politics into the podcast either. But getting back to the miracle that is life. The world we live in today has become so artificial. Fast food, processed foods, bright lights, artificial lights 24/7. You can convenience stores, discos, party places. It's become so much so that we're disconnected from nature to the point that there are people who actually specialize in helping people reconnect with nature. Now, that's not my goal here. My goal here is basically to feature living on my own, life after 50, in the country, and that's what I'm going to stick to. But forest bathing is now a thing where people from the city will leave for a few hours or for a weekend or for a retreat and get back to their roots in nature. We've been doing it for a long time, going camping, tenting, RVing, resorts that are more nature-based. Those are things that we've been doing, but I think in general, there are people who didn't have an upbringing like mine where nature was at your doorstep. Like, yes, I was born in a city. I was raised in an urban school, and I went to university. I got 2 different degrees. But man, when I was away for school for my professional degree, I was in the metropolitan area of Toronto, and I felt so out of my element because I couldn't get back to this. Like, this is half of my upbringing was going, quote unquote, to camp. You might call it a cottage, you might call it a lake house, you might call it just your country home, depending where you're tuning in from. There's different ways of what you call this, but we called it going to camp. And camp was much smaller than what I have here. We started out with an old 8-foot by 12-foot shack, essentially, with a wood stove and a table and a bench. And we would use that all year round as a family. And we eventually built a little 16 by 24 cabin, eventually got seasonal running water, eventually put in a septic system so we could have toilets that flush. But in the early days, running water meant my mom sent me down to the lake with buckets to get the water. I ran for the water. And to heat it up, we heated it up on the wood stove or on the propane cooktop, and we washed dishes in plastic tubs, and I didn't know any better. To me, that was normal. That was half my life. Like every weekend and every summer, that's what I did growing up. I wasn't really involved in organized sports because we were at camp. I was allowed, if I wanted to, I would have been enrolled, but I loved camp. I loved nature. I loved getting out here, doing things with my mom and dad, with my brother and sister, and I couldn't imagine a life where I'm disconnected from nature. I don't think I'd be who I am without it. Being who I am is important to me, and that's been a lifelong discovery process. It really has been a lifelong discovery process. If you happen to recognize my voice from anywhere, I did host a mental health podcast a few years back for a few years called the Monday Mental Health Show as part of my Defying Depression project. I actually started that under a fictitious name to protect my identity, and now it's water under the bridge. And if you figure out my true profession in life versus that, I don't really think it's going to come back to haunt me. But that being said, again, if you know me and know my main way of earning my income, please keep that to yourself. But that podcast did make it around the world, made it to Australia, New Zealand, it made it to Africa. I actually had quite the following in South Africa, which surprised me. And not in my ethnic group, I might add. You never know who you're going to reach when you put yourself out there in the world. But I really enjoyed that, but as I got a better handle on my own mental health, I didn't feel as genuine doing the show because I no longer needed it for me. So I let that go. But it was something I truly enjoyed doing. Yeah. So out here is for men over 50, although you could be female, you could be under 50, it doesn't matter. But my theme is for men over 50 living on their own, or people, again, men, but women are welcome to listen, of course, as well. But this is all from a solo male perspective. So it may not resonate with you. But it's also for men who are living a life that maybe isn't quite resonating with them now, and they're looking for something else, looking for something different. And maybe some of the stuff I have to say will help them make their own decisions moving forward. And if so, that's great. If that does happen, please leave me a note in the comments. Speaking of comments, future episodes, I want to have 2 separate little sections. One is going to be Campfire questions, where I answer questions from listeners or viewers about out here, about life after 50, about the solo life, about living out in the country. I would love to receive questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. And there's no holds barred. Just be respectful. That's all I ask. And likewise, there's going to be a second section called Campfire Wisdom, where I drop some philosophy about the solo life, the country life. So I'm sure one of the questions that might pop up when people, especially people who are watching the podcast, when they see the lake, they can see that there's a house in the background. Question being, am I off grid? Now, I have the utmost respect for people that live off grid. Now, for all intents and purposes, these people who are doing the off-grid life, they've basically created every modern convenience but off-grid. They truck in propane for heat, they have solar panels, they might have a windmill, they have batteries, they have an inverter, and they have appliances. They're essentially out in the country with every modern convenience. Okay, so yes, I'm out in the country. I'm really remote. I'm an hour from anywhere with a population of over 50,000. It takes me quite a while to get to work. It takes me quite a while to get groceries, things like that. I'm out in the middle of nowhere in northern Ontario, essentially. So I may as well be off grid, even though I do have an electrical grid connection. So technically, I am not off grid, but in every other sense of the word, I'm making my own. Oh, I'm carrying in my own firewood, heating with wood for the most part, but I have the modern conveniences of electricity and running water, as do most other off grid people. So I don't see how I'm that different, but technically, I'm on grid, even though it's a bit of a stretch to do that. So maybe that's my campfire question and answer thing right there is, am I off grid? As I mentioned, I grew up in the city, but I had a strong countryside life. Grew up weekends and summers living out, again, actually fairly close to where I am right now. I did live for 4 years in Toronto, the greater Toronto area, and I embraced the urban life, the problems with urban life, commuter trains, subways, bomb threats. It it wasn't me. And in my professional life, my first 8 years, I did live in a city not far from here, but far enough that, and I had a home. I was dating, trying to find the woman of my dreams, trying to find someone to start a family with. But at the same time, when I finished school, I already knew I didn't want that for myself, at least not right away. That was what I was telling myself. I didn't want that right away because I'd worked so hard in elementary school, high school, undergrad to get into professional school. I sacrificed so much. I lived a very academic life. Yes, I had friends. Yes, I went on weekends a little bit, but I never had amazing adventures. I didn't party hardy. I was really cognizant of working towards the future that I wanted, which was to be a professional. After a few years in the city, and basically my city home was basically where I slept after work. The last day of the work week, I mowed the lawn and then drove out to camp and spent all my quality time, my true living time at camp. And I eventually got to the point where I'm paying for two places, 2 times the property tax, 2 times the school tax, 2 times the work. And I'm like, why don't I just move out here? And I did that back in about 2009, and I've been out here ever since. Originally, I moved out to the camp that eventually was turned more into a home on the water, and commuted back and forth to work, and I enjoyed that. But as time went on, and stress of the profession, problems in my personal life, my high functioning depression got the better of me, and I needed to find ways of healing, of getting better, because the environment I was in my professional life was significantly contributing to my mental health struggles. And I did go on antidepressants. I did try counseling. And did it work? Maybe. No. What actually really helped was doing the Defying Depression project along with the Monday Mental Health Show. A lot of content I was creating, when I played it back on the day it actually went live, was exactly what I needed to hear that day. It's ironic, synchronicity perhaps, hard to say, but the saying goes that God or the universe helps those who help themselves. And I was starting to help myself a bit more. I really went down the rabbit hole with personal development, and that's how I ended up becoming a holistic life coach. I did go on an amazing, life-changing healing retreat that I'll talk about in another episode at some point down the road, that really helped me return to professional life as a much more well-rounded, well-adjusted, healthier person, and I've been doing much better ever since. So I'm, of course, very happy about that. It's rewarding, to say the least, to find help. Pardon me while I just get some wood for the fire here. It is a little cool here. Mid-May, it's just come on the calendar. And as soon as the sun's down, the air does cool off quite a bit. And the fire was keeping me warm, but the second that it burns down a bit, I can feel the evening chill a bit. A little bit more, I think. A little harder to see the firewood in the dark. This camera has really good night vision, but not that good when it's really dark. What's it doing? I haven't done too much filming with this camera. It has some idiosyncrasies I have to figure out yet. The gimbal has a mind of its own at times. A couple more pieces of firewood and that should do here. That's better. Oh yeah. That's a nice looking fire. So what is it like to be on your own in the middle of nowhere? How do I explain that? You're 100% relying on yourself. And like out here, we have winter for a good 4.5 to sometimes 6 months of the year. Usually about 5 months is the average. Late November until late April that's almost 6 months. No, it's 5 months. It's hard, and I don't have a snowplow coming up to my driveway. I literally have 2.5 kilometers of road that I have to be responsible for clearing the snow. And we get snow here. You can have 3 to 4 feet, 5 feet of snow, big drifts. And I have a tractor with a blower that's on the back of it that I can drive forward and it'll pick up the snow and throw it. But it's mechanical. And when it's minus 15 Celsius, minus 10 Celsius, and something goes wrong with that blower, you break a shear pin or another bolt falls off or the chain breaks. Working on metal when it's that cold, usually in the dark because it's after work sometimes when I have to take care of the snow, with a headlamp on, and your hands are freezing cold and you're tired and cranky because you had a tough day at work. There are a couple times I'll just say I lost my shit and scream at the top of my lungs, "This isn't fun anymore!" And yeah, there are some tough times, but when you stick it through and you solve the problem and you finish the job, you have yourself to thank and you can appreciate a job well done and the self-reliance of it. There's a certain pride that comes with that. And I think it's good for you because I know people, I'm not going to mention any names, who can't change a tire, who, if something doesn't work in their house, they have to call someone. I'm not naming names, I'm not pointing out any fingers. I wouldn't say a jack of all trades, but I solve a lot of my own problems because when you're this far away and you have to pay 2 hours travel time for a professional to come out and look at whatever the problem is, you think twice about calling them. Yes, there are times you have to, and you got to pay the bill, and that's part of the charm and the joy of living out in the country life. There's a saying that there's always something. There's always something you got to do, something you got to repair, something you got to fix, something you have to take care of. And if you're not taking care of it, there's something you know you should be taking care of. So that's the motto out here. I do love having nature here. Just in the last few days, I saw a snowshoe hare who was changing color from white to brown fur. I saw blue jays, chickadees, nuthatchers, some blue indigo buntings, I think they're called. A friend told me what they were called. I've seen deer. I've seen 2 moose recently. It's nature is part of the gig. What I really don't want to see anytime soon is a bear. Hopefully one's not sneaking up behind me right now. That's always a bit of a worry. But in general, you coexist with nature. You try to give them space. I do feed the birds, especially throughout the winter, because I enjoy their company. I do have a beautiful German Shepherd named Lucas. He just turned 4 today. Happy birthday, Lucas. He's inside resting. I didn't want him by the fire tonight or adding any background complaints about being bored by the fire for my inaugural podcast episode here. Having a dog, I think, living out here in the country is important. Having that companionship, also to alert you of anyone approaching, things like that is important. Also, he's the excuse I have to get out and take a walk every day, usually 2 walks a day. Sometimes we go on a little bike ride. It's good to be outside, be active, besides just doing chores. Otherwise, I might just be on the couch watching Netflix or something all day. No, I don't do that anymore. I've found, as I've hit my 50s, that, and even in my 40s, it started in my 40s, but the 50s especially, I just don't have the patience, the time, or the energy for drama and bullshit. I couldn't be bothered. And likewise, what I choose to focus on, particularly like, I used to be a huge movie buff. Like I would watch all sorts of action movies, action adventure, and martial arts. Big Steven Seagal fan, Jean-Claude Van Damme fan, all that stuff. And Jason Statham, things like that. And I don't care for the violence anymore. I just want things that are like more story driven. I prefer to read or listen to podcasts. I prefer to feed my mind with things that are good for it, that'll keep the brain cells firing in a positive way. I really want to, when I lay down, when my head hits the pillow, to fall asleep rather quickly and not be worried about things, not have my head spinning about a movie I just watched 10 minutes before bed. My sleep hygiene practices have changed immensely. I'm not even on the computer or television within an hour, sometimes 2 hours before bed. I have installed lights that I can dim and change to non-blue colors to help with setting up my eyes and brain for sleep mode. These are things I never thought of I'd see myself doing ever when I was a young man. Another thing I never saw myself doing as a young man is meditation. Meditation has been a lifesaver and a game changer for me personally. And I absolutely rely on it to keep my brain sharp. I keep the depression at bay. I'm able to slow my mind down to sleep. I don't need sleep medication anymore. Yeah, there was a time I was on very potent antidepressant and prescription sleeping pills just so I could fall asleep. And there's ways around it if you get into personal development and learn from masters that are out there that have put their work out there for free or for low cost. And I became a sponge and I absorbed stuff, and some of it worked for me and I kept it in my routine. Some of it didn't work for me. It's in the back of my head in case I ever want to try it again. Trying hard to keep growing, keep moving, keep evolving, but ultimately the 2 goalposts for me are peace and fulfillment. I like to create. I have an artistic side. I'd like to do a little bit of landscape photography every now and then. I like to write every now and then. this podcast is one of my creative expressions that, for better or for worse, is I'm going to give it a go, see what happens. Ultimately, if it becomes successful or not, it doesn't really matter. Like Defying Depression, I did for 6 years. It never was commercially successful, but I do know it helped people. That people have told me. And that was a reward in itself, is just that I helped someone else deal with their own battles, their own demons. Whew. Yeah. Wow. What a night. This is a perfect night. Fire's crackling. Nice and warm. My knees are nice and warm. The waves make nice background music. The moon is out. Can I show you guys the moon? It's behind the cedar tree there. It's about half full, I think. Maybe 3/4 full. Hard to say from here. But the light emanating behind the trees, like the backlit cedar trees, that's all from the moon. There's no artificial light around here at the moment. So that's something for me. One of the things I love about living out here, if something gets you going, say you're upset about something and you can't sleep, there's nothing stopping me from strapping on a headlamp and going for a walk at midnight. There's no one that's going to bother me. I might spook a deer that's sleeping on the side of the road or something. That's about it. Anything else keeps its distance because of the headlamp. Take the dog, go for a walk, or come down, sit by the shore. The dock isn't in yet, but when the dock's in, I can sit down at the dock, look up at the stars. These are things that are a little harder to do when you live in the city. There could be people with the bad intentions out at nights, as you may or may not know, or you may or may not have run into in your own life experience. Out here, it's different, and the vast majority of the people that do live out in the area are other people with similar country values, that you help your neighbors, you keep to yourself, and it's more or less safe out here. And my hometown, the town I grew up in and used to feel very safe in, unfortunately has changed for the worse. It's not uncommon for an occasional murder at this point. Muggings, break-ins, overdoses. These are all things that 20 years ago was like a rare thing. I feel like the distance from the urban centers is like my buffer zone. It's my protection, my isolation. And I can bridge that gap with technology. Like I'm talking to you through the internet, thanks to Starlink. I can do my life coaching remotely with high-speed internet. It's really nice. My professional work, unfortunately, I can't do remotely. I have to go to the office for that, and that's fine. I do that, and I've chose to do that, and it is a sacrifice I make so that I can live out here and enjoy the solitude, the peace and quiet, the safety, the bit of a slower pace. It's a slower pace. It's enjoyable. I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything else. I do hope that the politics of this country don't make it so I can't enjoy it anymore. They certainly are trying. But that being said, this is life out here. I do hope, if you like what I've talked about, that you'll subscribe to the podcast. I do hope if you think this is something you want for yourself, that you will start to investigate in how you can find your own life out here. Because life out here, man, I love it. This is Tom for Out Here, solo, simple, and rural. I'm going to end it here, folks. I'm going to try to have another episode out in a week. Check for it next Sunday. And we will catch you in the next one. Good night, everyone.